We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully your day is going well. It is Wednesday. Had a busy week so far. We got a lot of shit to talk about. More importantly, I got a whole shitload of emails I got to get through. I don't know how I'm going to get to news with all the emails I have. I had a number of guests on the last several shows, and I got to catch up on the emails. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, Mike, what the fuck are you wearing? A red hat, and it says, make Alcatraz great again. Now, this was sent to me from a follower on TikTok. I think he may be a listener on the podcast as well. Good guy. He's a comedian. His name is Michael J. J is spelled Jaye. And he said, Mike, would you wear the hat? Now, he sent me two hats. He sent me this hat, and then he sent me a black hat, which goes a little better with the camera. But it says, make Alcatraz great again. And I think you get the joke. But I would encourage you to check Michael J out on TikTok. He's a funny guy. It's at Michael J, spelled Jaye comedy. Michael J comedy. Check it out. And Michael, thank you very much for the hats. Now I'm going to take this hat off and put a normal hat on for one very good reason. When I have stuff on my hat, it gets distracting. Not so much for you, but for me. My eyes go to it all the time. And that's why when you ever see me wear hats, it's always pretty plain. Now, if I'm on TikTok doing it with my phone, it would end up being backwards. Thankfully, with what I'm recording here on my computer, it's correct. So I'm able to show those hats, great hats. But I also got another gift in the mail from a listener who's been on the show before, JT. I like this one too. This one I might get a little shit for wearing out in public, but you know me, I'm not afraid to stir some shit up now and again. But here's the shirt. Let's see if you can see it. It says, Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack indicted that big orange prick. I love the shirt. I love the hat. Thank you very much for sending those to me. The shirt came from JT. We know JT from being on the show. And Michael J, I'll just say to you, thank you for the hat. And if you want to come on the show, all you have to do is send me an email and we'll get you on. So anyway, and you know, ever since I opened that P.O. box I told you about, because people ask me to do it, I don't encourage anybody to send me anything. You're not required to send me anything. But some people have gone ahead and done it, and I appreciate that very much. All right, let's get to the business at hand. And the business at hand tends to be emails. We have a whole shitload of emails. We had a lot of stuff going on yesterday, but we got to get to the emails. First one comes from Darren. Now, you remember Darren. He was on the last show, did a great job. This is what Darren says. He says, wow, I heard my voice for the first time outside my head. Sorry, I have a creepy laugh. I'll work on that. The one thing I wanted to add was Kimberly was married to Gavin, but he had her when she was good. My eyes tell me she's aging like milk or bread, not wine. Anyhow, thanks for having me. If you ever get to Montana, let me know. I got dinner. Darren. Well, first of all, there's nothing more enticing to a guy like me than free food. So thank you for that, Darren. And actually, my wife and I had been talking about coming to Montana. I don't know when, where, or how, but if I do, I will certainly contact you. Darren was a great guy. He did a great job on the show. It is weird when you hear your voice for the first time outside your head. That was long ago for me. I was probably 13, 14 years old, and it did take some getting used to, but for better or worse, I know what my voice sounds like now, and I'm not surprised about it. As far as your creepy laugh, I didn't get that. I didn't get that it was creepy, but you're being overcritical of how you sounded. The last thing you were talking about, Kimberly and Gavin. We spoke about Gavin Newsom on the show and how much we like Gavin Newsom, but have to question his decision-making, having known that he was married to Kimberly Guilfoyle long before she was dating Donald Trump. And he's suggesting that she's lost a step or two. since being married to Gavin. And I checked into it. She did look much different. Right now, she looks pretty hard, or as my mom would say, she looks like she's been ridden hard and put away wet. And she's a little weird, a little conspiracy theory. But back in the day, she was a very attractive young woman, and I'm sure she was more in line with what Gavin would be married to. But something went wrong. Gavin still seems to be cool, but I think this one was Kim's fault because she went off the fucking rails. So, Darren, thank you very much for being on the show. Thank you very much for the email. All right, next up. Hey, Boomer, I enjoyed the podcast with Darren. I'm sure being surrounded by MAGA and self-serving Republican elected officials isn't an ideal situation when it comes to maintaining one's sanity. There are those giving up on red states, but it's because of people like Darren why we can't. There are decent, hardworking people in red states who deserve as good a life as anyone. It's not always easy to get up and move when you're relying on state assistance or haven't had an increase in pay in over a decade. It's not easy to vote crooked elected officials out when they've gerrymandered the heck out of the state maps. Hopefully, some legal updates can give your listeners in red states a boost. I've been following Democracy Docket and keeping up with these cases, fighting some of the worst gerrymandering maps in the country. Alabama had a map of 70-30. The Supreme Court ordered the maps to be redrawn to be 50-50. As you reported a couple of months back, Alabama refused to do so, but today the Supreme Court ordered a special master to redraw the map. This is a potential blue seat in the House with a new majority black district. Not only that, but the Supreme Court called out Alabama Republicans in an over 200-page response. This special master will make sure the maps are fair. We just need to make sure the people of Alabama who want a change and a better way of life to show up and vote. DeSantis' 5th district map in Florida is being redrawn after an appeal to the Supreme Court. Little Ron isn't going to be happy about that, but who cares? His ridiculous open and carry without any requirements in conjunction with his brazen assaults on women's rights, education, voting rights, immigrants, Black history, LGBTQ, and trans rights has already turned the state against him. The last thing he needed was a fair map drawn in the 5th district, but that's exactly what he's about to get. His map violates the state constitution, so even though Republicans are appealing, it doesn't look like he's going to get away with this. The courts found it diminished the rights of minorities. It's looking like an Alabama repeat. In addition to those, we have Georgia in litigation for an additional district in Atlanta. We have Louisiana with the additional black district. We have Texas. Texas could have an additional 3 to 5 minority districts. Also, Wisconsin has litigation to redraw extreme party gerrymandering. The Republicans are afraid in Wisconsin. They are now threatening to impeach the new Supreme Court justice because she's liberal and they feel she will require the maps to be withdrawn or redrawn. Why, oh, why are the Republican go-to impeachment and threats? Their antics and threats are getting old. The challenges to all these gerrymandered maps in red states aren't as dramatic as Trump and his incoherent manic videos, or as outrageous and entertaining as Marjorie Taylor Greene and MAGA, but it's just as important. In the upcoming weeks, it's going to be talks about keeping the government open and impeaching Joe Biden. I have no doubt the next few weeks will be a nonstop, jam-packed congressional soap opera, but let's not forget those in red states who are suffering and need representation. Those who are in red states don't get distracted by the political theater. The news isn't reporting it, but there's progress being made behind the scenes. You haven't been forgotten and people are fighting for you, so hang in there. Check your voting status, re-register if you've been kicked off the voter polls, know when, where, and how to vote in your area. Make a plan in advance, inform your community, and carpool if you need to. When it's time to vote, both local and federal elections show up in droves and make your voices heard. Thanks, Boomer. Give you a wild guess who wrote that. Think about it. Yep, you're right. It was Old Soul. Old Soul, thank you very much for all the input, all the information. And it was a pleasure having you on the show. As you'll hear in the emails, a lot of folks loved you too. I got to wonder if you shouldn't have your own damn podcast too, because you know a lot of shit and you're very articulate about it. But you're more than welcome to come back on the show anytime you like, as is the case for all listeners. I'm always anxious to have listeners on because I always come up with a gem of a guest. And it's all the listeners. It's not picking and choosing one here or there. You're all different, but all do a great job. So I always appreciate you having you on the show. All right. Next one. This one comes from Deb. All right, Deb. Hi, Mike. Well, today was great. After a long weekend, I had several podcasts of yours to listen to while working. I enjoyed them all, but I have to say I really loved Old Soul. She is truly amazing. I loved everything she had to say. Her emails were good, but her podcast was even better. She's soft-spoken, yet there is strength in her words. She's intelligent and so well-read. I can't tell you how very impressed I was with her. I don't mean to sound condescending, but she is my oldest daughter's age, and it was like listening to my Brooke. She goes on to say, if you could get the number for her volunteer thing for abortion rights help and say it again during a podcast, I would have really appreciated it. I wrote it down somewhere and apparently threw it away by mistake when leaving the beach house today. All of the podcasts with guests were good, as always. I loved hearing Ed, and Darren was interesting too. You just keep me entertained all day, and I thank you for doing what you always do. For once, I'm calm and chill, and it's bedtime. I stayed chilled out all day, I think, due to the multiple podcasts. So, as always, thank you. Hugs, Deb. You heard her, Old Soul. I don't remember the number, but if you can email it to me, I'll make sure we put it out on a regular basis on the podcast. So those people who don't get it will get it, or at least I'll have it. And if they ask for it, I can give it to them. So if you please, Old Soul, send me the phone number and we'll get it out there as far and wide as possible. All right. This next one comes from Cyril. Like the name. Sounds so classy, doesn't it? It's way classier than Mike. Everybody in the world is named Mike. You know what it's like to have the name Mike? Everywhere I worked, if someone yelled out, "Hey, Mike," 9 people would turn around. It was really confusing. And on top of it, my father's name was Mike. And when I was really little, they didn't want it to be confused, so they would call me Mick or Mickey. Hated that fucking name. I hated it. Didn't sound cool or tough when I was a little kid. You know, you thought about Mickey Mouse. That's not tough. It wasn't cool being called Mick or Mickey. And even some of my siblings will refer to me as mixed from time to time because that's all I was at home. When I was in school, I was Mike. And now as I've grown up and gotten old, I'm Mike. And I deal with it better. But it's still not as cool as fucking Cyril. So Cyril says, "Hi, I'm French and I live in Norway." Well, that's an interesting juxtaposition. For the second time lately, I was talking to some Trump followers from home that a single American keeps supporting Trump is beyond me, let alone Europeans. In those conversations, I was listing his numerous crimes, and their defense was that Trump never took his presidential salary. I did some searching on Google, but got different information. Do you know the final word about this? Thank you for your time. Well, sir, I don't know the exact facts. I think he did refuse his salary the first 3 years. I think he may have taken it the last 4 years or the 4th year. But you got to remember, he didn't need to take his salary when he had the Secret Service staying in his clubs and his golf clubs all around the country at 4 times the normal rate. Excuse me. He grifted the country for a lot of money. He didn't take his $400,000 salary, but he made quite a bit more than that grifting the U.S. government. And then, of course, we heard about, excuse me, water went down the wrong way. Anyway, of course, his daughter and son-in-law made $650 million while he was in office. Not taking the presidential salary, that just tells you how weak their argument is and how little they know. Even if he didn't take any of it, he grifted this country for so much money, continues to grift this country for so much money. That's a bullshit answer, but you'd expect something stupid from a Trump-la-fuck. All right, the next one. This one comes from Jace. He says, hey, Mike, enjoyed the show last week with you and Lisa. Looking forward to doing more in the future. As you know, our so-called AG is facing impeachment trial in Texas, in the Texas Senate. As I said, I'm not real optimistic he'll get convicted, but we did have some good news in that the Senate rejected his bids to the impeachment charges. It was stronger than I thought, 24-6 and 22-8. Of course, all 12 Democrats voted for it. But if this stays the course, his lying ass might get impeached. Talking about the Texas AG, Paxton. That's going on right now, and hopefully he gets his ass kicked out because this guy is so dirty, such a fucking criminal. It's ridiculous. He goes on to say Republicans may have had enough of his corruption. Still a long way to go. I will send you updates. I'm attaching a story on this vote if you want to follow it on the Texas Tribune Independent and a nonpartisan from what I've seen from them. Talk to you later, Jace. Yeah, I think that's something we should follow. This Paxton guy, this AG in Texas, when Donald Trump came into office, we heard about him and he was under indictment and then nothing happened. How do you get under indictment and then never have to go to trial? He has yet to go to trial. Clearly, there's some fishy shit going on. But with this impeachment, the interesting thing is that Republicans are the one that came out and said, fucking enough. We're going to impeach you. So that's a bad sign when your own party is coming after you. The Democrats can't because the Republicans would do nothing but obstruct. But the Republicans, they had a fucking enough and hope Paxton ends up packing. All right, this next one comes from someone by the name of Yurka, if I pronounce that properly. Hello, Mike. Yurka here from Ontario, Canada. Big fan of your TikToks and your podcast now. Here's a question that I've not heard anybody address in the media regarding all the Trump criminal indictments. He goes on to say, let's assume that Trump is convicted and sentenced to jail in all 4 criminal trials. Let's say for the argument he gets 5 years in every single one of them, totaling 20 years. What happens then? Is he going to serve them at the same time? That would be bullshit if you ask me. Or is he going to jail hop for the next 20 years? Keep up the good work, Yurka. I don't know for an absolute fact to what would happen here, but I've seen other situations like that. And I think what would have to happen, because they are different jurisdictions, you would probably have to see him jail hop. He'd do his 5 years or 3 years on good behavior, and then he'd have to go to the federal jail or to New York or to DC or whatever. But the important thing, Yurka, you have to understand is regardless of how much time he spends in jail, say it's 1 5-year term, that's enough to finish him. That's enough to take him out of the equation. He won't survive 5 years any more than he would survive 20 years. I know everybody wants him to get the 700 years that we've all talked about, but that's neither here nor there. He's not going to last long in prison. He's going to be 78 years old in 2024. He's not healthy of mind or healthy of body. He's going to experience things like he's never experienced before. Emotionally, he'll be broken. I said early on when we were talking about these trials, well before they ever happened, and at a time when I honestly thought they'd never put him in jail because he's a former president. Well, my mindset has changed quite a bit. At this point, I don't think they can help but put him in jail. They're almost going to have to do it in order for the country to be satisfied and get some closure on this shit. But I mean, keep in mind, you want him there for 20 years. He's going to be 97. He's going to be lucky to live to 80. So it really doesn't matter. I just want him gone. I want him quieted. I want him out of the equation. If it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, I don't care what it is, whatever it takes, I want him gone. But he is no doubt going to get convicted in different jurisdictions. And I think because they're different jurisdictions, then he would have to go one right after the other. I'm presuming the feds would get priority, and then he'd go to the states and such. It's a little different, like, for example, in Georgia, what does he have, like 13, 14 counts against him? Now, if he gets convicted of multiple counts, one might have a term of 5 years, one might have a term of 10 years, and one might have a term of 20 years. If he gets convicted of all three, there's two ways that can go. They can be consecutive or they can be concurrent. Now, if it's consecutive and he's got a 5-year, a 10-year, and a 20-year term that he has to serve, they would be back to back. 5 years, he'd be done with that. Then he'd be on the 10 years, and then he'd be on the 20 years. So for all intents and purposes, he's in jail for 35 years, which will never happen because he can't survive that long. But if it's in the same jurisdiction and in the same indictment, say he's got 5, 10, and 20, he could be sentenced concurrently, which would mean they all ran at the same time. So he'd be in jail ostensibly 20 years, in spite of the fact he's been charged with 30 or given 35 years in a sentence. So that would be concurrent. I don't think he can do that with separate jurisdictions. There's no doubt somebody in the audience that knows this better than I do. And if you know, like Old Soul or Fred or anybody out there that knows better on this situation, please send me an email and clarify if I'm wrong here. All right. This next one comes from Gary. He refers to himself as the oldest boomer. Says, good morning, Mike. I haven't written in a while, but you have not missed have not missed a TikTok or a podcast. However, when I Google your podcast, the first one that shows up is always the podcast apple.com. I've learned how not to click in that link unless I'm in a hurry and don't have a full hour to listen. The Apple podcast is always at double speed. Unless you want to listen to you sound like one of the chipmunks, then stay away from this link. However, it does make me wonder if I'm the only listener that gets this high-speed service, or are we all privileged to receive this? Thanks as always for the daily dose of sanity and your birthday wishes the other day. Now I'm even an older boomer. Can't wait to hear your thoughts on all that will happen with DDD, Dirty Diaper Donnie, this month. Gary. Well, Gary, I have never heard that before, that the Apple link is faster. Now, usually on these apps where you hear the podcast, there is a selection where you can make it faster or slower or whatever you want to do. Next time you go to that app, check that out. See if there is a selection that either puts it at double speed or normal speed or half speed or whatever. It may be there. I doubt that everything that's coming off of Apple is high speed because I haven't heard that before. But I will tell you this, Gary. If you go to rationalboomer.com, if you continue to have a problem with the Apple connection, go to rationalboomer.com, and there's a whole list of connections for TikTok, for Instagram, for Facebook, for YouTube, but also other platforms where you can get podcasts. You can try one of those out, or you can go to YouTube. You don't have to watch it. I mean, it's a video version of the podcast, but it doesn't mean you have to watch it. The audio will be there. So give that some thought. Gary, I appreciate the input. Always great to hear from you. All right. This next one comes from Coach Dave. I don't know what he coaches, but maybe he'll tell us. So, Coach Dave starts out by saying, I fucking love your content. As a baby boomer born in 59, I can relate to what you say and how you say it. I bet you can. I was born in 60. We are in the same chronological era, 59, 60. A lot of my friends were born in 59. I was born in 60, some in 61. It's a whole thing in that era. We all kind of have the same attitudes and same vocabulary with the word fuck in it a lot. He goes on to say, I live in Florida now, but was born in Iowa and raised in the suburbs of Chicago in a Republican family. I never gave a shit about politics. I just wanted to get laid and smoke weed while I played sports and went to Catholic schools. That seems contradictory to me. I knew some people that went to Catholic schools and they had higher levels of strictness in their schools. And I don't remember them longing to get laid and smoke weed while they played sports. But, you know, it's different for everybody. You were in Iowa. What the fuck? Anyway, he goes on to say, now that I retired and have way too much time on my hands, I have started to follow folks like you and have done a lot of reading. Most recent book, Peril, and watching documentaries. Most recent, Get Me Roger Stone. My efforts are designed to help me understand what is really going on and what the media is not telling me. Exactly. You're not getting the full story if you're just watching the media, unfortunately. You should be able to, but you're not. He says, as time has gone on, I realized I lean further to the left and I am more liberal than conservative. I've watched this Trump bullshit play out, and I just got so damn mad that I had to educate myself, which is the reason I found you. Thanks for explaining things the way you do. Even a college dropout like me can understand it. Well, maybe you can understand it because I'm a college dropout. Like I've said, I went to college for about a year. Most of that time was drinking beer and chasing girls because I was a kid. But maybe that's why we relate. We both didn't make it through college. He's finishing up here by saying, so here's my question. My fucking Trump-la-fuck friends always say high gas prices are Biden's fault. What I have read, heard, and now assumed to be true is that Trump reduced refining capacity in the U.S., which has made us dependent on foreign oil, and so that Trump's Mideast buddies keep cashing checks. Is that correct? Yeah, Trump is responsible for that, and he does have some responsibility for that. But I think more importantly, presidents really aren't responsible for the price of gas. It's supply and demand. It's the Middle East and the Russians fucking around with it. You know, every time gas prices go down, they think of ways to try to make it go up again by cutting production or whatever the fuck they're doing. But it's certainly not Joe Biden's fault any more than it would have been Donald Trump's fault had we had high gas prices then. Now, what you have to understand is toward the end of Donald Trump's term, gas prices were really low. And why? Because we had COVID. Nobody was driving anywhere. There was no place to fucking go. I remember just taking rides with my wife just to go someplace, never get out, never go in any place, just take a road trip and then come back home just to get out of the house. And I remember one time buying gas during COVID, and it was like $1.62 a gallon. It was that way because of supply and demand. Less people were using gas, the air was clearing up, and gas prices had to drop because there wasn't the demand for the supply we had. So in those times, they try to cut it back. Bottom line is, it's not Joe Biden's fault at all. Joe Biden has no say over what's going on with gas prices. You know, the whole idea of drilling more and fracking and all this stuff, that's fine. The Republicans will always say we were energy independent. Well, we were not. We have never been energy independent. We're better than we ever were. We depend on them less, but we've never been energy independent, regardless of what they say. I swear to God, that's not COVID. I've just had this congestion in my chest for a while. So he wraps it up by saying, "Thanks for what you do, Coach Dave." All right. Got another email. And who is this from? This is from a boomer from Phoenix. He says, "Mike, your shows over the Labor Day weekend were all fantastic. Ed, Lisa, and Jace brought their A game." Now, he wrote this before Darren had been on. He says, "I'm quite sure I will not be the only one to say this, but I believe you have another star in Old Soul. She is calm, mentally acute, and above all, rational. Perfect for the reoccurring cast on the Rational Boomer podcast. Thanks for all you do on TikTok and the podcast, fellow Boomer, Phoenix, Arizona." Now, you heard him, Old Soul. I know you were reluctant to come on the first time. But once you got on, I think you found that it was easy to do. And so not only me, but a lot of folks are expecting you back. So keep that in mind. Get me that number. And also, let's set something up to have you back. All of you, Lisa, Darren, anybody who wants to come on, I'm more than happy to do it. It really makes my job easier. And frankly, I think the shows sound better when I have a guest, a listener guest. All right. Next one. "Hi, Mike, dude. I just listened to your podcast with Old Soul and really enjoyed it. You need to have more young people on the show. And if you can manage a trifecta of young female and persons of color, that adds such an interesting perspective to today's issues. They are the future of this country, and we need to listen to them. Couldn't agree more. I will tell you this. Race, gender has no bearing on who comes on this show. Anybody who wants to can be on the show. But I will agree with you. We've had some great folks on the show, and Old Soul is one of them. And if there are some younger people that want to be on the show, I'm all for it. We call it the Boomer, Rational Boomer, but that doesn't mean you have to be a boomer to participate in this program. We're all in this together. We all got to live together. The Gen Xers, the millennials and Gen Zs, you're the future, man. We're counting on you. And if you want to come on and throw in your ideas, we're all for it. Now, he goes on to say, "I thought she was right on the mark that right-wing media will eventually turn on Trump." I agree. We're seeing a bit of that already with Governor Sununu saying on Fox that Trump will sink the 2024 election for Republicans if they stick with him, a reason I might vote for Trump in the Wisconsin primary if he isn't excluded from the ballot per Article 14 of the Constitution, where a Secretary of State can exclude him from the ballot for that reason. I also think in the coming months, most of his co-defendants will turn on him to save their own hides. It's going to be interesting. Keep up the great podcasts. Did you know where the empty secret? Okay, that's something different. I'll get to that in a second. I appreciate that. I appreciate that immensely. And I've been telling you all along, Donald Trump will sink the Republican Party. He's all but done that already. All right, this next one says, "Do you know where the empty secret document folders were found during the Mar-a-Lago search? Thanks from the crazy Canuck." Another Canadian. And crazy, no less. crazy spelled with a K. That, you bring up a good point. We heard about those empty document folders and we were all up in arms, but we haven't heard anything about it since. Where are they? We don't know. And maybe when the court case starts with Jack Smith and the classified document situation, maybe we'll find out. Or maybe that's why Jared Kushner got $2 billion. Who the fuck knows? I don't know. I think we will find out, though, in the classified documents case. And I think we are going to be horrified by it. I've said that before. I think that we are going to see a lot of things that we've never seen before, and it's going to be kind of scary, and it's going to make it easier for them to put that motherfucker away. All right, this one comes up. Fellow boomer here. Love your programs. Mike, watch you exclusively on YouTube. I'm sure you're aware of Project 2025, disgusting at the number of people who are eagerly co-signing and aiding in its implementation. Included in, but not limited to, are the Federalist Society, who are falsely claiming the unitary executive theory is somehow supported and even mandated by Article 2. And then he sent a link to show me it. My concern is that Americans are focusing too much on Trump and too little on the fact that we have a Republican Party aided by tens of millions of rabidly anti-democratic authoritarians. Trump didn't create this wave. He's simply riding it. When we put him in prison, that wave will simply see another figurehead riding it, guiding it, and even whipping it up. Dealing with these folks who are dead set on eliminating the very essence of our representative government feels at a time like chasing around little brush fires with a bucket of water. Meanwhile, the volcano is spewing fire, making more and more little fires. That volcano, I believe, is to be our right-wing billionaires. Who knew that giving these sociopathic ideologues massive tax cuts and an environment to become richer than God would see them use that wealth to ruin the lives of we peasants, essentially enthroning themselves and their puppets to rule over us in a dystopian Christo-fascist hell? This next election is crucial. Trump won't be an issue. The right wing and the Project 2025, etc., will be. It should be our primary focus. Thank you, Mike. I'm addicted to your content. Keep up the great work. And that was signed by Al. Thank you, Al. I appreciate that immensely. And I know what you're saying about the Project 2025. They have this plan all laid out. And if you read it, you know it's a little concerning. It's very concerning, as a matter of fact. What I'm hoping happens here with the downfall of Trump and the rest of the Republican Party, I hope that obviously Biden wins and the House gets taken by the Democrats again, and the Senate gets expanded seats for the Democrats. And then after that point, that pretty much destroys the Republican Party. The way they've gone into things, they can't do it again. They're going to have to step back and rehabilitate change their situation, reimagine their situation. And then that 2025 project thing probably won't be a factor. But I think it's important that people like me and all of you, we talk about that Project 2025 so people understand just how draconian it is. I mean, that's what it's always been about. It's about people being informed. And unfortunately, in this country, there's a lot of people that are ill-informed. So we need to keep talking, keep controlling the narrative, and keep pounding on these people. It's absolutely incumbent on us to do that if we hope to get out of this fucking mess, honestly. All right, we got a couple more. This one comes from Nath, N-A-T-H. Good morning, sir. I'm a Canadian. Canadians are very concerned about the way U.S. has been deteriorating since 2016. Trump not only destroyed the U.S., but his criminal mind is affecting other free societies around the world, especially its neighbor, Canada. I enjoy listening to you. Thank you for your service, Nav. Yeah, that's one thing we have to consider. I mean, we've got so much bullshit going on in this country. We don't think about how it impacts other countries. Certainly it impacts Canada, and there are people that are Trump fans in Canada. God knows fucking why. But as much as you've got Trump-lefucks in this country, you've got the equivalent in Canada, probably in Mexico too. And then you've got the rest of the world being very nervous because of the instability of this country. The stability of this country is a big factor for the stability of this world. So even countries that aren't next to us are affected indirectly by what happens here. And I think that's what's important that we need to be looking at in 2024 when we get back the House and the Senate and the presidency, that we try to stabilize things for us, for our neighbors, and for countries all across the world. All right, I got one more, and this actually wasn't an email. This was a comment on the podcast website, all caps. Sylvia, is this true all over TikTok? Trump will have immunity and possibly 4 indictments will be tossed out. I feel like he will get away with it and scared about what's going to happen to our country. See, this is the thing that bothers me. You see something on TikTok or in the press and you think it's true. Sylvia, I'm going to tell you this right now. Donald Trump's not getting immunity from anything. There is no reason to give him immunity. Even if he wanted to flip on somebody, there's nobody left to flip on. He's the top of the fucking heap. He's the top of the pyramid scheme. He's not going to get immunity. The 4 indictments will not be tossed out. He will not get away with it. And there's no reason to be scared. As I've told you before, here's a guy that to date has 91 felony charges. Each of these DAs has a conviction rate of 98 or 99%. There is no way he's running the table on all of these. In fact, most of them he'll probably be convicted of. But even if he has a good stretch, a little bit of luck, he only needs to be convicted by 1 or 2 of these charges, and he's fucking done. Sylvia, don't worry. It's going to be fine. He's going to get indicted. He's going to get convicted, and he's going to go to jail. There is no question about it. It might be 5 years, it might be 500 years, but it really doesn't matter because once he's gone, he's fucking done. All right, we are going to take a quick break and we will be right back. Now, that was a lot of damn emails. 43 minutes we spent on emails, but you know what? I love that. I think it's very important that we have interaction from the audience on this show. That's why I encourage people to come on and be a guest. I encourage people to email me. If you're thinking about sending me an email, don't think about it. Just send it. Send it to rationalboomer@gmail.com. If you want to be a guest, use that same email address, rationalboomer.com, rationalboomer@gmail.com, rationalboomer@gmail.com. Send me an email, say, hey, I'd like to be on the show, and we'll get it figured out, and we'll get you on the show. You can ask anybody that's been on before. It's easy. It's never stressful. It's just a conversation. All right, let's get to the news at hand. We had one big news story. Henry Enrique Tarrio. I like to call him Enrique Denny Tarrio. Now, if you're old, you'll get that reference. Remember back in the 70s, there was this disco expert and he had a TV show. His name was Denny Tarrio. He was the disco teacher to the stars. He claimed he taught John Travolta how to dance for Saturday Night Fever. I don't know if that's fucking true. Don't care. But let's talk about Enrique Tarrio, the former chairman of the violent neo-fascist gang, the Proud Boys. He was sentenced yesterday to 22 years in prison for his role in the January 6, 2021 U.S. Capitol attack. Now, U.S. District Judge Timothy J. Kelly handed down the sentence in a District of Columbia courtroom Tuesday. This is the longest sentence for Capitol attackers. His sentence also included 36 months of supervised release after he gets out. Now, the Justice Department was looking for 33 years for 39-year-old Tarrio for the role he played in the violence on January 6th. Given the opportunity to speak before his sentencing, Tarrio's voice cracked, and he wiped away tears as he told the court he had failed his family, according to reporters in the courtroom. Yeah, you failed yourself, you failed your family, and you failed your fucking country. Now it's time to pay the fucking piper. He said, standing before you today, I feel I failed as a brother, a fiance, nephew, as a son. I will always regret making decisions that did not put them first. I've taken care of my grandfather for most of my life, and now I have failed him. Now, the interesting thing about Tarrio, he wasn't even at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Now, he was already in jail. He was in jail for some other fucked up shit. He destroyed Black Lives Matter sign or something like that. And he was in jail when it all happened. So you're probably thinking, well, how does he end up going to jail for this if he wasn't even there? Well, he was one of the generals, meaning he's the one that helped strategize and put this together. In spite of the fact that he wasn't there, prosecutors argued that he was instrumental in mobilizing the gang to Washington and overseeing their assault on the Capitol in what was ultimately a failed effort of a coup. Tarrio oversaw the attack from a hotel in Baltimore. He was barred from entering Washington after arrested for 2 days prior on charges he defaced Black Lives Matter banner during a pro-Trump rally. Well, that's a different story. I'd heard he was in jail, but it sounds like he was just barred from coming to Washington, D.C., and he was in a hotel in Baltimore, which is a better deal. He did spend some time in jail prior to that day, though. Tarrio and 4 other Proud Boys were convicted in May as part of the Justice Department's seditious conspiracy case. The Proud Boys were lined up behind Donald Trump and willing to commit violence on his behalf. That's what prosecutor Connor Mulrow told jurors during Tarrio's trial in April. Now, these defendants saw themselves as Donald Trump's army fighting to keep their preferred leader in power, no matter what the law or the courts had to say. Now, on the day of the attack, Proud Boys members Joe Biggs, Zachary Rell carried walkie-talkies as they moved through the crowd, yelling marching orders to other members to breach the building. Proud Boys member Dominic Pizzola was the first to smash a Capitol window and lead rioters inside after he stole an officer's riot shield. Now, Judge Kelly said Tarrio's absence from the Capitol served strategic purposes. It did allow his lieutenants to rile up the crowd, and it did, from his perspective, insulate him in just the way he's arguing now, distance himself from what in fact unfolded that day, Kelly said. That's useful to someone as smart as Tarrio, and then before the day was out, publicly putting on social media, I'm proud of my boys and my country, and don't fucking leave. Now, last week, Kelly sentenced Biggs to 17 years in prison, Rell to 15 years in prison. Pizzola was sentenced to 10 years. Proud Boys member Ethan Nordine, known for numerous violent assaults, was sentenced to 18 years for his role in the Capitol attack. Prosecutors said Nordine acted like the general of an army the day of the riot, leading his men across fallen police barricades. Now, of course, of the 5 Proud Boys sentencing hearings, Kelly repeatedly pointed out that the gang's violent efforts on January 6th would have a cascading effects on elections going forward. What happened that day, it broke our tradition of the peaceful transfer of power, which is the most precious thing we had as Americans, Kelly said during big sentencing last week. Notice I say had. We don't have it anymore. In asking for a lighter sentence, Tarrio's lawyers pointed out that he has a history of working with law enforcement, meaning he's a fucking rat. That'll do him well in prison. Court records show the Proud Boys chairman previously worked undercover for investigators during a 2012 fraud case he was involved in. Okay, I'm sure the Proud Boys will appreciate your service to their enemy, the DOJ. So anyway, these guys are going to jail. And one thing you have to consider about this, I'm thinking there are members of Congress, Donald Trump, the people around Donald Trump, the likes of Ginny Thomas and Roger Stone and those people, they got to be a little nervous now because of what they were convicted for. Now, we had the people on the ground, the grunts, if you will, that the dumb fucks that attacked the Capitol. They were the worker bees. And then you had the middle management, if you were, the Tarios, the Nordines, and Rels and such. They were kind of leading the dumb fucks. They were middle management. Now, this is about seditious conspiracy. And conspiracy means more than one person, multiple people involved. So if the grunts on the ground needed the middle management or the generals, those generals needed somebody else. And who might that be? Well, I suspect those are the sitting members of Congress, the Roger Stones, the Ginny Thomases, the Donald Trumps, for that matter. A lot of people wonder why there haven't been attacks at the recent indictments, and I'll tell you why. Because it took all three factions to be working together to get this done. You have to have the people stupid enough to go attack a building or people. Now, 1,000 of them are in jail, so the worst of the worst can't get to those events. Secondly, the middle management at the times were under investigation or indicted, and they couldn't do anything. And given the circumstances, the real problem that these factions had is that there was nobody at the top, people in Congress, Donald Trump or his little lackeys. Nobody was there to organize and inspire and to push them into doing this. And those are the people that were probably the most culpable in this situation. Without them, this would never happen. We don't see it happening at the indictments now because there aren't people in power that are ready to organize and fundraise and give tours and do all that shit. They're too afraid to do that now. And that's why it's not happening. So as much as these fucks were charged and sentenced with seditious conspiracy, I can only believe that the conspiracy goes farther than just this group of people. It's got to go higher up. And I'm thinking with Jack Smith, we know there are some superseding indictments coming out from Jack Smith, and it has to be the sitting members of Congress. As I've said before, Jack Smith hired a couple lawyers to specifically look into those sitting members of Congress. We know that Ginny Thomas and Roger Stone are under investigation. We hear their names come up in ongoing investigations right now regarding January 6th. That's how you know shit's coming. Because Jack Smith, while he indicted Donald Trump, we're getting information about all kinds of investigations. He ain't fucking done yet. And when it's all done, there's going to be a lot of people crying in their fucking milk. Sitting members of Congress, Ginny Thomas, Clarence Thomas, Roger Stone, Donnie Trump, and all the little Trump-la-fucks around him. This ain't near over. This was just the start, and it sets the stage for other people to be charged with seditious conspiracy. Let's be perfectly honest. Seditious conspiracy, I can't think of a bigger crime against this country than that. And there's going to be a lot of people that have had a lot of power and a lot of privileges in their life that are going to find themselves in bad situations. I'm sure Enrique Tarrio never imagined himself in a prison for 22 years, but there he is. I think there's some other folks that we'll be hearing about soon that will be just as fucking surprised. All right. Mark Meadows, he served, of course, as chief of staff under President Donald Trump. He pleaded guilty and waived his right of an in-person arraignment alongside 6 other defendants in Georgia's election interference case. Now, here's the deal. 19 co-defendants. We know that Donald Trump waived his arraignment rights. We know a few other people did. But as of yesterday, all 19 defendants have waived their arraignment rights, meaning they don't have to go to Fulton County, Georgia. They just do it online or over the phone or whatever the fuck they do. They plead not guilty, and now they have to wait for the trial. Now, the question about that is, why did they do that? Well, some of them might say, well, I'm busy. I don't have time to go to Atlanta. Well, you better make time, because you're going to be sitting in a Georgia prison at some time soon. But I think more importantly than that, with the arraignments, that is the start of the video cameras in court. So had they shown up and been arraigned, that would have been on TV. We all would have seen that multiple times over and over again. And I'm sure they wanted to avoid that. But they're just putting off the inevitable, because when they go to court and the trial starts, it's all going to be on video. We're going to see everything. Not only we reasonably minded folks, but the Trump-lefucks will be absolutely crazed about watching it, knowing that JFK Jr. or some fuck is going to come up and save the day. But that's not what will happen. What will happen is all the evidence will be exposed. Donald Trump will be shown for who he is, and he will get convicted and go to jail. And then it's going to be interesting to see if the Trump-lefucks, what their response at this point. Some people will continue to believe the lie, or at least spew the lie. But there will be some people that will have their eyes opened, and they will have no choice. Now, former Trump attorney John Eastman, former Justice Department official Jeffrey Clark, and Georgia Republican officials Kathy Latham, Sean Still, David Schaefer, and Misty Hampton followed suit. They did the same thing that Mark Meadows did. So far, every defendant to enter a plea in the case has chosen not guilty. Now, Trump entered his own plea. Fulton County District Attorney Willis announced charges against the group in August, nearly 3 years after Trump refused to accept that he lost the 2020 election. Now, there's something else we're waiting for something to be ruled on. A federal judge has yet to rule on whether to move Meadows' case to the federal court system as he requested. Kind of a risky gambit. Meadows testified last week to argue for the move. That was a big mistake, him getting on a witness stand and testifying under oath. He kind of implicated himself. He implicated Donald Trump, and this is not going to go well for him. Willis alleges that Trump's refusal to admit defeat, even in the face of evidence provided by his own White House staff, led to a multi-pronged scheme that violated Georgia's expansive state racketeering act. Now, the charges go from the famous call, the perfect call on January 2nd, 2021, where he wanted him to find him enough votes to win. The Georgia case is just one of several criminal cases for Trump. And this is what I've said before. There's so much coming head on like a steamroller toward Donald Trump. There's no way he beats it all. I don't think he'll beat any of them. There's too much evidence and too many witnesses. And Donald Trump is, for all intents and purposes, done. No matter what the Trump-lefucks tell you, he's done. He is without question done. It's a matter of who's going to come down with them and to what extent. Like I say, the Ginny Thomases or the Roger Stones or the sitting members of Congress. Go back to the sentences for the Proud Boys and the seditious conspiracy. All of these people, we know they had contact with Donald Trump and they had contact with the Proud Boys. Remember, they took all their phones and all the text messages from that day. They have that. They have emails. They have phone calls. They have everything. Even the Secret Service. Remember when the Secret Service accidentally, on purpose, lost all their text messages? Well, we know now that the Jack Smith found those text messages, and they are going to be part of the case too. Jack Smith is not somebody to be fucked with, and neither is Fonnie Willis. These two people, they are smart, they are determined, they are they're ruthless. If somebody's committed a crime, they're going to take them down. That's what's going to happen. So for those of you that are worried, don't worry. Just sit back and relax and be resigned to the fact that this is all going to go the way it's supposed to go. There might be some bumps in the road, but there's no way Donald Trump gets out of this. There's no way any of them get out of this. It's too extensive, and it's coming from all directions. Had an interesting turn of events in Alabama. Federal judges said Tuesday that they will draft new congressional lines for Alabama after lawmakers refused to create a second district where black voters at least came close to comprising a majority as suggested by the court. You'll remember this went to the Supreme Court and the legislature said, yeah, we're just not going to do it anyway. Well, federal judges says, we aren't having that. We're going to draw the fucking map for you and you're going to live with it. Now, the three-judge panel blocked use of the state's newly drawn congressional map in next year's election. A special master will be tapped to draw the new districts for the state. And the judges said Alabama is expected to appeal the decision to the U.S. Supreme Court. And we know what they did last time. But Alabama better get on the stick and oblige these federal judges, because they could be looking at some serious sanctions if they don't. The Republican-controlled Alabama legislature hastily drew new lines this summer after the U.S. Supreme Court in June upheld the panel's finding that the map, they had one majority black district out of 7 in a state where 27% of the residents are black, likely violated the U.S. voting rights. Now, the three-judge panel in striking down Alabama's map in 2022 said the state should have 2 districts where black voters have an opportunity to elect their preferred candidates. Because of racially polarized voting in the state, the map would need to include a second district where black voters are the majority or something quite close. See, that's what they do. They cut up the maps so there's no way black voters could ever have a majority. And frankly, that is fucking illegal. And as much as they don't want to abide by the Supreme Court or any other court for that matter, they're going to have to. They don't get to do just what they want to do. They're going to have to abide by the federal court, and it's too fucking bad. They're going to whine and cry about it and make all this stupid comments about it, but it's tough. You can't just tell the Supreme Court or federal courts to fuck off. We're going to do it our way. That's not how our system works. All right. Now, we know coming up October 2nd is the lawsuit that Letitia James, Attorney General for New York, has against Donald Trump to the tune of a minimum of $250 million. And as I've said before in previous podcasts, that may be the most devastating thing to date to happen to Donald Trump. It will absolutely ruin him financially. It'll ruin his business. He won't be able to do business in New York. And there might be some offshoots of criminal charges ultimately. I've said that before. The Manhattan District charged the company and the CFO. But after this lawsuit, it wouldn't surprise me if Alvin Bragg came back out and said, okay, now let's look at the criminal things, because clearly what Donald Trump did in this case was criminal. Now, the New York Attorney General's office has asked a judge to sanction former President Donald Trump and others for repeatedly using failed legal arguments. Letitia James' office proposed that the defendants in the financial fraud case against the Trump Organization be fined $10,000 collectively. The judge also asked to impose a $10,000 fine on defense attorneys. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot of money, but 250 million does, and throwing another 10, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 on there is not going to make them happy. Not so much because of the money, but because it proves them wrong and forces them not to keep spewing fucking lies. Now, the court rejected these arguments for a second time, noting that they were borderline frivolous. Even the first defendant made them, and observed the reading defendant's brief was, to quote a baseball sage, Yogi Berra, deja vu all over again, a court filing from James' office said. According to James, New York Supreme Court Judge Arthur Engoron can impose financial sanctions upon any party or attorney in a civil action or proceedings who engage in frivolous conduct. The Attorney General, looking for $250 million from Trump and other defendants for allegedly financial fraud. The request for sanctions comes just 4 weeks before the trial is scheduled to begin. Now, it's going to be interesting. We know that Donald Trump has occasion to do just the opposite of what he's told to do. So as we're out there today and tomorrow, we'll see if he has anything to say about these sanctions. I'm sure he will. Now, Donald Trump has another problem. He has a bunch of people that work for him that have the goods on him, but he's refusing to help them financially. And these are people that don't have a lot of money and are having a difficult time actually paying for their legal fees. Now, taking into account former Donald Trump lawyer Jenna Ellis's highly publicized griping that Donald Trump and his PAC have given her the cold shoulder when it comes to paying her legal fees, the racketeering charges in Georgia, one former prosecutor claimed that makes her a prime candidate to flip on former President Donald Trump. What else does she have to do? If she can't afford the legal fees and she may go to jail, the only thing she can do is flip at this point, trying to save her ass. Now, according to a report from Newsweek's Ewan Palmer, Trump's greatest concern as he faces off with the Fulton County District Attorney, Fani Willis, is that Ellis makes a plea deal now that she's faced with the possibility of legal fees that could run into the high six figures. Well, if Donnie's afraid of it, why doesn't he do something about it? He just doesn't have the money. He's hemorrhaging money at this point. Ellis, who's become an avid supporter of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' bid to replace Donald Trump, is what kind of sparked the ire in Donald Trump. He doesn't like the fact that she's not loyal. Not loyal, and she's supporting Ron DeSantis. So that's probably the reason why he's not giving her money. But Donald Trump, as we know, will cut off his nose to spite his face. And he does this all the time. He doesn't work in his best interest. It's all about emotions and all about revenge. And frankly, it makes no sense with somebody like Jenna Ellis. If you're afraid of what she might say, then why don't you do something about it? Well, you don't do something about it because you know that you just can't give in. You're the one that's right, and it couldn't be that you're wrong. Now, Jenna has taken to Twitter or X or whatever the fuck you want to call it, and is crying and whining about this, but it's all to no avail because because Donald Trump hasn't responded to it. Now, Trump has defended the J6ers, the accused for January 6th. And she goes on to say, has Trump defended the indicted lawyers? Has Trump defended the pastors jailed or threatened with fines over former chief medical advisor Anthony Fauci's failed COVID policies? Has he paid for anyone's legal defense except himself? Oh, and Jason Miller's child support lawyer? She wrote before adding, I have no problem with Trump using donations to fight a weaponized government. I encourage people to donate after the first New York indictment. I do have a problem with Trump using little grandma's pensions to pay for Jason Miller's child support battles. Well, Jenna's a little wired up, wouldn't you say? She's not happy. She's not happy about this shit. But I don't think it's going to do any good. Even if Donald Trump, somebody said to him, you got to do this, otherwise she's going to kill you in court. She won't give in. Michael Cohen on CNN said, Donald's an idiot. Let me just be very clear. When it comes to paying money, he is truly an idiot. He has not learned yet the three people you don't want to throw under the bus, your lawyer, your doctor, and your mechanic, because one way or another, you're going to go downhill and there'll be no breaks. And Michael Cohen's right. There's no question about it. Now, I also wanted to mention one thing, too, as we're getting close to wrapping things up here. There's little Petey Navarro. Remember him? Yeah. Pete was indicted for and now charged with contempt of Congress. And why was he charged? Well, during the January 6th committee, he was asked to provide documents and to testify. He refused on both counts. So now he's been charged with 2 counts of contempt of Congress. Now he's been whining and crying and saying it's too expensive. I can't afford this. I can't afford it. But his trial started yesterday. They sat the jury. Today they will have the opening arguments, and they're thinking that this isn't going to go very long. And really, when you think about it, he's being charged with contempt of court for not turning over documents and not testifying. So in court, all the prosecution has to do is say, Mr. Navarro, did you turn over the documents? Nope, I have executive privilege. Well, sorry, dude, you're not the president, so you don't have executive privilege. Oh, did you testify? And he'll say, no, I didn't testify. And then the prosecutor will say, well, look at the time. You're guilty. Let's move on. And that's what's going to happen to him. He is going to get convicted quick, fast, and in a hurry in this case. But you got to wonder about Petey Navarro. He's a whining little punk bitch. But he was on Ari Melber's show on MSNBC, you probably remember. And on that show, he was talking about the Green Bay sweep and how I had this plan and what they were going to do and how they were going to game this situation just to add credibility to what he's saying. He's got his sleeves rolled up. I'm going to get my hands dirty and we're going to do this. He's so fucking broke that he's going to represent himself. And somebody who represents themselves has a fool for a client. Isn't that the old saying? And if his performance on Ari Melber's show is any indication of what kind of lawyer he is, he's fucked. He's fucked big. But you got to wonder if this case, this contempt of Congress case, which might get him a year or something in jail, if that's just the tip of the iceberg. If he was instrumental in the planning of this whole gaming and this attempt to overturn the election, you got to wonder if he's not going to show up in some of these superseding indictments from Jack Smith. No doubt he's been looked at too. So this poor baby is going to cry and whine about this case. And once that's over, don't be surprised if Jack Smith comes out with more shit against this fucking clown, and there'll be more whining and crying about it. I don't feel sorry for this guy. This guy had every chance to walk away from it. And to this day, he continues to say, the election was stolen. He keeps embracing that. That's the thing that got him in trouble. And instead of saying, yeah, I fucked up, throw myself on the mercy of the court and hope for the best. He continues to hold on to that. And he's going to look like a fool in his court case, no matter how short it is. But I don't think he's done. I don't think he's done after this case. This is just contempt of court. This has nothing to do with the insurrection. This just has to do with his unwillingness to comply. So after it's all said and done and those superseding indictments come out, is Petey Navarro going to be on that list? My guess is he will. And if he thinks he's fucked now, he has no clue what he's in for. All right, we're going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen. And hope you have a great day. And we will talk to you again tomorrow.